Snow swallowed sound, but not the hunt. Anastasia Silvermane ran anyway, boots slipping on ice-slick stone, one hand braced under the hard curve of her 6-month belly, the other clamped around the leather satchel thudding against her ribs. Every breath knifed her chest. Blood from the cut at her hairline had frozen in a crust across her eyebrow. Her left sleeve was black and stiff, where someone else's blood had dried there first. Behind her, through the pines, torchlight moved in broken orange teeth. "Don't damage the womb," a man shouted. "Magnus wants her breathing." Another voice laughed. "Breathing, yes. Talking, no." The laugh carried farther than the wolves did. Her wolf wanted to turn, to tear, to die with her fangs in somebody's throat. Her body refused. Her body was no longer only hers. Under her palm, the pup rolled once, then went still, as if listening. "Easy," she whispered through cracked lips. "Stay with me, little moon. Stay." The mountain pass narrowed ahead into a shelf of rock no wider than a wagon. Wind screamed across it, dragging at her hair, clawing heat from her skin. Below, the ravine dropped into black nothing. Above, the moon hid behind a bank of storm clouds thick as wool. Her knee buckled. She slammed her shoulder against stone, caught herself, kept moving. The satchel strap had cut a trench into her collarbone hours ago. She could feel the shape of the contents without opening it. Wrapped oilcloth, wax-sealed scroll tubes, the iron key bound with blue thread, Silvermane bloodline records stretching back 9 generations, names and births and oaths. Her mate had died to keep them out of cult hands. If she dropped them now, if she let the wind claim them, then his death became only ash. A howl split the dark behind her. Too close. She stumbled into a stand of fir, ducked low, and pressed herself between 2 trunks, shaking so hard her teeth clicked. Smoke stung her nostrils, smoke that did not belong to this forest, smoke soaked with fat and cedar and scorched wool, smoke from a den she would never enter again. A branch snapped nearby. "Anastasia," one of the hunters called, mocking sweet. "You can't outrun winter pregnant." Another. "Come quietly, we're saving you the pain." She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted iron. Pain was already living in her bones, a bright white wire pulled taut from spine to abdomen. Not labor, not yet, but the warning cramps had come every hour since dusk, stronger each time. The first time, Darian had been alive. She squeezed her eyes shut and saw his face anyway. Blood in his beard, golden eyes gone glass bright with effort, pushing the satchel into her hands with fingers that shook. Run. His mouth had formed the word before sound failed him. Now she was still running, and he was still dead. The hunters moved past her hiding place, their torchlight sliding over bark inches from her shoulder. She held her breath until stars danced at the edge of her vision. One paused, sniffed, muttered, "She bled here." "Then she won't get far," said the first. "Magnus said the prophecy bitch breaks by dawn." Prophecy bitch. Her wolf snarled silent fury inside her ribcage. Anastasia stayed motionless until their steps faded downslope, then forced herself upright and angled higher into the pass. Her thighs burned, her boots were wet through. Somewhere under the cold, under the terror, grief sat like a stone too heavy to lift. Widow. The word had not fit in her mouth when elders used it for other women. It felt monstrous now, a shape with teeth. A contraction clenched her lower belly, sharp enough to blur the trees. She slid down to one knee in the snow and bent over the mound of her stomach, panting. "No, no, no," she whispered. "Not now. Please. We're close. We have to be close." She had never seen the Alpha King's border garrison, only heard of it in cautious, respectful voices. High walls, hard soldiers, neutral ground for petitioners. If she reached it, cult hunters could not simply drag her back over the line without declaring war. if she reached it. The wind shifted, and with it came a new scent beneath pine and smoke. Iron, tallow, wolf, hearthfire banked in stone, civilization, guard posts, men awake. Hope hurt almost as much as the cramps. She pushed herself up and staggered onward, whispering names to stay conscious. Darien, Mother Ilara, Little Moon, Darien, home, home, home. But home was gone. Fire had taken it, and screaming, and a man with a silver ring carved like a broken eclipse. The memory rose without mercy. The first knock on the den door had sounded polite. Darien looked up from the table where the bloodline ledgers lay open under lamplight. Anastasia had been darning the cuff of his winter coat and humming to the pup, who kicked whenever she sang. Outside, snow slid from the roof in soft thumps. Inside, rabbit stew simmered. Ordinary night. Safe night. Then the second knock came, and the hinges shuddered. "Border warden," a voice called. "Open under King's warrant." Darian's nostrils flared. "That's not a warden." He was on his feet before she could rise, moving with that effortless speed that had first made her laugh when they were both younger and reckless. He crossed to the shelf, pulled down a wrapped bundle and dropped it in her lap. The satchel. The records. "Take this," he said. "Why?" A third knock. No, not a knock. A ram strike splintered the outer frame. Through the crack she caught the glint of white enamel masks painted with crescent scars. Cult. Her blood went cold. Darien cupped her face hard enough to anchor her. "Because they came for this. And for you. You run if I tell you. I don't leave you. You leave if I tell you." His voice broke, just once. Then he kissed her forehead, then her belly, and whispered against her skin, "Guard her, little one. Bite like your mother." The door exploded inward. 5 men in winter leathers rushed the threshold, moonhook blades out. Behind them stood a 6th in a dark cloak, clean boots untouched by mud, smile thin as wire. "Darien Silvermane," the cloaked man said pleasantly. "By decree of Protector Magnus Ironhold, surrender the prophecy records and the vessel." Vessel. Anastasia snatched her skinning knife from the table and bared her teeth. Darien shifted beside her, wolf surfacing in his gaze. "Get out of my den," he said. The cloaked man sighed. "Always this drama with bloodline fanatics. Kill him. Keep her arms intact." Steel sang. The den became motion and heat and splintered wood. Darien drove the first attacker into the hearth, embers exploding. Anastasia slashed the thigh of a man reaching for her belly. He screamed and backhanded her so hard she hit the wall and saw sparks. Someone grabbed her braid, yanked. She stabbed blind and felt blades sink into soft flesh. A boot crushed her wrist. Bones did not break, but pain ripped a cry from her throat. "Careful!" shouted one cultist. "Magnus said no bruising to the womb." Another laughed. "Then hold her still." Darien roared, a sound she'd never heard from him, raw enough to shake plaster from the beams. He tore one man's throat out with his teeth and hurled another across the room. For one heartbeat, she thought they could win. Then the cloaked man stepped in, drew a narrow black dagger, and drove it under Darien's ribs while 2 others pinned his arms. Everything stopped. Anastasia's scream seemed to come from very far away. Darien staggered, coughed blood, and looked at her. Not at the men killing him. At her. "Run!" he rasped. She crawled to him. Hands caught her ankles, dragged her back. "Take her now," the cloaked man ordered. "Burn the den. The widow's easier to shape when she's homeless." Darien moved with the last of his strength, slammed his elbow into the man holding him, and lurched toward Anastasia. His bloody hand found the satchel still tangled in her skirt and shoved it against her stomach. "Go," he said, eyes fierce despite the red at his lips. "Our pup. Go." Anastasia bit the hand gripping her ankle, twisted free, and threw herself through the pantry hatch into the night tunnel Darian had carved years ago as a joke against blizzards. Behind her, shouting. Behind that, the crackle of igniting oil. She ran bent double through earth and roots, one hand over her mouth to smother sobs, the other clutching satchel and child and everything she had left. She did not look back until she burst onto the ridge above the den. Flames punched through the roof. Smoke twisted up to the moon like a signal. From below came a voice, faint but clear in the frozen air. Find her. The breaking point was not Darian's death alone. It was the sight of their home burning while men argued over whether to carve her open before or after dawn. She chose then. Not grief, not revenge. Survival first. Witness second. Her child would live. The truth would live. And if she had to crawl bleeding to the Alpha King's gate to make that happen, she would crawl. By the time the garrison walls appeared through the blowing snow, dawn had begun as a gray bruise in the east. They rose out of the mountain like old teeth. Black stone, iron watchtowers, banners stiff with frost. Fires burned in braziers along the rampart walk. She could smell wolf soldiers before she saw them. Leather, steel oil, wet fur, vigilance. Anastasia's vision tunneled. She waved once with the hand not holding her belly and nearly fell. Halt! A voice boomed from above. State your pack and purpose. She tried to answer and coughed instead. Blood flecked her lower lip. She spat red into snow and forced sound through a throat raw from smoke. Silvermane, she croaked. Petitioner, sanctuary. A horn sounded. The side gate cracked open. 4 soldiers spilled out, spears low, winter cloaks snapping in the wind. None lowered their weapons when they saw she was pregnant. Hands where we can see them, said the lead guard, a broad woman with frost beating her lashes. Her gaze flicked to Anastasia's satchel. Drop the bag. No. The word came sharper than she intended. Panic hit, immediate and hot. No, it stays with me. That can be decided inside, the woman said. If you're clean. Clean? Not cult-marked, not carrying plague, not lying. Anastasia laughed once, bitter and broken. I don't have strength left for lying. A figure moved in the shadow of the gatehouse behind the spear line. Taller than the rest, shoulders wrapped in a plain soldier's cloak, jaw marked by an old pale scar that ran from ear to collar. He said nothing. He just watched. Too still, eyes unreadable. The lead guard circled Anastasia, sniffing the air. Smoke. Blood. Male scent gone cold. Her expression tightened. Where's your mate? Anastasia swallowed. Dead. By whose hand? Cult of Ordinary Blood. Magnus Ironhold. At that name, 2 soldiers exchanged a glance. Convenient accusation, one muttered. Every spy says cult when they need a bed. I'm not asking for a bed, Anastasia snapped. A contraction seized her, folding her in half. She hissed through her teeth and clutched her abdomen. I'm asking for law. The lead guard caught her elbow before she hit the ground. Easy. I said no touching. Anastasia jerked away, feral, knife already in her hand, though she did not remember drawing it. Spears lifted. Someone cursed. The scarred soldier moved then, fast but measured, stepping between spear points and Anastasia as if his body were a shield he used often. Down, he ordered the others. His voice was low, roughened by cold and command. Sir, she drew steel. She's half frozen and in pain. Down. Reluctantly, spearheads dipped. Anastasia stared at him through wind-blown hair. Up close, she saw that his cloak hid better armor than a common guard wore, and his scent. Winter cedar over banked fire, wild and royal and impossible, hit her wolf like a struck bell. Danger, her mind said. Mine. Something older and more reckless answered, then recoiled in horror at itself. The soldier's gaze dropped to her knife, then rose back to her face. "No one takes your bag," he said quietly. "No one touches you without permission. But you come inside now, or you and your pup die on this road." Pup. Not vessel. Not burden. Pup. Her fingers loosened by an inch around the blade. From far down the pass came the faint echo of hunting horns. The soldier heard them too. His eyes sharpened. "Choose, Silvermane." Anastasia looked past him at the open gate, at the heat bleeding from within, at armed strangers and high walls and all the ways this could still become another trap. Then she pressed the knife back into its sheath with shaking hands. "I choose inside," she whispered. As the scarred soldier reached for her, not touching yet, waiting for her nod, the child inside her gave one hard, sudden kick that stole her breath and turned the soldier's face to stone. The soldier's hand stopped in the air, fingers spread as if he'd touched flame. Anastasia felt it too. Not skin yet, just proximity. But heat surged up from her belly in a rush so sudden her knees almost gave. The world narrowed to the space between his palm and her body. Snow. Horns. Spears. Wind. All of it dropped away beneath a violent humming awareness that made her wolf rear up inside her, like it had scented spring after a century of winter. His pupils blew wide. He swallowed hard, once, and when he stepped in to catch her elbow at last, the contact snapped through her nerves like lightning striking bare bone. She gasped. So did he. The lead guard was saying something. Orders. Probably. But Anastasia couldn't hear words. She could hear blood. Her own. Rushing hot and loud through her ears. His. A deep, pounding rhythm that called to something in her chest that had no right to answer. No. No, no, no. Darian's face flashed behind her eyes. Darian's laugh in their den. Darian's blood on the floorboards. And over that grief came something savage and new. A pull toward this stranger that felt less like desire and more like gravity. Inevitable. Brutal. Wrong. The soldier's jaw clenched. A muscle jumped in his cheek near the old scar. He leaned closer, as if scenting her throat, then jerked back like he'd remembered witnesses existed. "Inside," he said hoarsely. Anastasia tried to nod. The motion tipped the world sideways. Dark stone rushed up. Someone cursed. The soldier's arm came around her. Not possessive, just sure. And she was moving through the gate while the horns from down the pass sharpened into real pursuit. Heat hit her face first. Then light. By the time her vision cleared, she was on a narrow infirmary cot with rough wool blankets over her legs and the satchel still looped around her wrist by its strap, as if someone had tried to take it and failed. Her boots were gone. Her soaked stockings hung over a brazier. A bitter herb smell, yarrow, feverfew, dried mint, sat heavy in the room. A woman in healer's gray leaned over her with a sympathetic mouth and cold eyes. "You're awake," the healer said. "Try not to strain yourself." Anastasia pushed up on her elbows immediately, panic spiking. "My child." The healer placed 2 fingers on Anastasia's wrist with practiced gentleness. "I'm very sorry. The journey was too hard on your body. You've lost the pup." For a second, Anastasia stared at her, uncomprehending. Then she laughed. A cracked, feral sound. "No. Shock can make denial worse," the healer said softly. "We've prepared linens. It's kinder if you let us—" "No." Anastasia shoved her hand away hard enough to rattle glass vials on the side table. Pain shot through her lower abdomen, but beneath it, there, a flutter. Small, stubborn, alive. "You're lying." 2 attendants stood by the far curtain, heads bowed over folded white cloth so tiny Anastasia's stomach turned. Burial wrapping. Baby-sized. She had not authorized this. She had not even been asked. "I can feel my pup," she said, voice rising. "Get away from me." The healer's expression tightened by a fraction. "Restrain her before she tears her stitches." "I have no stitches." One attendant moved toward the door and hissed to someone outside, not quietly enough. "She woke too soon. Tell matron the Queen Mother's coin bought trouble." Anastasia froze. Queen Mother. Paid. The room tilted again, but this time from rage. She ripped the blanket back, swung her legs off the cot, and reached for the skinning knife she'd hidden in her boot. Gone. Hands grabbed for her shoulders. She twisted, elbowed one attendant in the throat, and snarled when the second seized her wrist. Panic detonated in her chest, bright and absolute. Not again. Not held down. Not while strangers decided her child was dead. "Let me go! Hold her! Don't let her scratch her belly open!" The door slammed wide. Boots hit stone. Enough. That voice. Low. Rough. Impossible to disobey. The attendants stilled, though they didn't release her until the scarred soldier crossed the room. He dropped to one knee in front of her instead of looming over her and held his empty hands out where she could see them. "No weapons," he said quietly. "No one touches you unless you allow it." "Then make them leave." He didn't look away from her. Out. The healer drew up. "She's unstable. If she miscarries retained tissue." "Out," he repeated, and command cracked under the single word like thunder under ice. They went. Even the healer, though her glare promised she'd carry the insult upward to someone with rank. The door shut. Silence crashed in. Anastasia's breath came too fast, too shallow. Her hands shook violently. The soldier stayed kneeling, watching her like one might watch a wounded wolf deciding whether to bite. "I need to check your pulse," he said. "May I touch your wrist?" No one had asked her permission in 2 days. Not when cultists grabbed her, not when guards disarmed her, not when healers declared her child dead. The question hit harder than force. She gave one jerky nod. He took her wrist as if it were breakable crystal, thumb resting light against her pulse. His skin was hot. Heat traveled up her arm and settled under her ribs, where her wolf paced in frantic circles. "Breathe with me," he said. "In for 4. She glared at him, then dragged in air. "Hold 2. Out for 6. He counted with soldier's steady calm until the spinning slowed and the edges of the room came back into focus. When another cramp gripped her, she doubled over with a hiss. Instinctively, he reached with his free hand to brace her, palm landing across the curve of her belly. The pup kicked. Hard, not a flutter. A full, indignant thud against his hand. Both of them went rigid. A pulse of heat exploded outward from the contact. Not imagined. Not metaphor. Real enough that the lantern flame beside the cot guttered and flared. Scent flooded the room, wild and bright. Cedar, stormfire, male wolf at full claim. Her own answered before she could stop it. Jasmine and blood and moon snow, opening like a wound. His head snapped up, their eyes locked. Gold ignited in his irises, swallowing brown until all she saw was wolf. He sucked in a sharp breath, as if struck through the heart. "You're mine," he whispered. The words landed like a blade and a prayer at once. Anastasia recoiled, horror and hunger colliding so violently she thought she might be sick. "Don't," she rasped. "Don't say that." "Darian is dead," her grief screamed. "You do not get another bond. You do not betray memory with breath and skin and heat." But her wolf surged toward him anyway, frantic, recognizing what her mind refused. Mate. The soldier snatched his hand back from her belly as if burned. Fury twisted his features, at himself, at fate, at the room, at the lie. He stood in one fluid motion and slammed his fist against the bedpost so hard wood cracked. "She said the pup was gone," he snarled, more to the air than to her. "I can scent life from the doorway." Anastasia stared, chest heaving. He turned back to her, forcing his voice flat. "Rest. I'll deal with the healer. Who are you? She demanded. A beat. Then grimly, Zephyr. The name dropped like a stone into deep water. Not a soldier then. The Alpha King. Night wrapped the garrison in iron quiet. Wind hissed through arrow slits. Somewhere in the lower barracks, men laughed too loudly over dice and watered ale. In the infirmary annex, Anastasia sat propped against the wall with her satchel in her lap and didn't sleep. She had barricaded the door with a stool anyway. When the knock came, she had the borrowed blade in hand before the second tap. Anastasia, Zephyr said from outside, voice pitched low. I brought broth. And clean bandages. Leave it. A pause. Then the scrape of pottery set on stone. I can, he said, but your left forearm is still bleeding through. She looked down. He was right. The old gash had reopened where an attendant grabbed her. Blood had dried tacky to her skin. Silence stretched. Finally she said, open slow. The latch lifted. Zephyr entered sideways, as if giving her every chance to strike if she chose. He wore no crown, no formal coat, only a plain dark tunic and trousers tucked into boots. The soldier's cloak was gone. The scar looked whiter in firelight. In one hand he carried a steaming bowl. Over the other arm lay a heavy wool cloak warmed by the brazier. Most importantly, his belt was empty. No sword, no dagger. He nudged the door closed with his heel and stopped well short of her cot. Instead of taking the chair, he lowered himself to the floor, back against the opposite wall, making himself smaller in the space. Anastasia blinked despite herself. I thought kings preferred looming, she said. Bad for trust. She almost laughed, didn't. He set the broth on a low chest between them. Marrow bone, salt, garlic, easy on the stomach. He lifted the folded cloth bundle beside it. Bandages. I can call a female medic if you prefer. You expect me to trust palace medics after today? No. His mouth tightened. I expect you to survive despite them. Her fingers flexed around the knife hilt. Your healer declared my child dead while I could feel him move. My healer won't hold that title by sunrise. The certainty in his tone should have soothed her. Instead, it stirred new fear. Kings who moved that fast were either just or dangerous, sometimes both. He watched her for a moment, then said, May I come closer and wrap your arm? She hesitated. Why ask? Because choice was stolen from you enough already. The words hit too close. She nodded once. He approached on his knees, slow, eyes on her face, hands visible. When his fingers touched her skin, he worked carefully, efficient as a field medic, not flinching when she hissed at the sting of clean water on torn flesh. Breathe, he murmured. I am breathing. Like a cornered cat. Appropriate mood. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth, gone in an instant. He tied the bandage and sat back immediately, not taking advantage of the closeness, not trying to scent mark, not reaching for her belly again, though she could feel the effort it cost him. The bond, she said flatly. Can it be broken? His gaze dropped to the floor. Not without killing one of us. Sometimes both. Cold dread slid down her spine. I had a mate. I know. Roughness scraped his voice. I read the patrol report. I saw your burns. I smelled his blood on your sleeve. He met her eyes. I'm not asking you to forget him. Then what are you asking? Nothing tonight. He pushed the warmed cloak toward her. Just this. Eat. Sleep if you can. If nightmares come, call guard. I posted my own men outside. She stared at the cloak, at the stitched wolf head emblem near the hem. Royal issue, yes, but worn soft with use. His, not ceremonial. You could lock me in a tower, she said, claim bond rights, demand obedience. His expression went hard with disgust. That would make me Magnus with better manners. For the first time since the den burned, her shoulders dropped half an inch. Later, after he left the broth and retreated back to the floor by the door rather than crossing the room again, exhaustion finally dragged her under. She woke to fire. Not real fire, memory fire. Oil on beams. Darien falling. White masks at the threshold. She came up swinging, blade flashing from beneath her pillow, and found Zephyr inches away, having crossed at the first sound. The knife point hit his throat. He froze instantly, hands lifted, throat bared to steel without resistance. A single bead of blood welled where the edge kissed skin. Anastasia. His voice stayed calm, though his pulse hammered visibly. You're in the garrison. You're safe. Liar, she gasped, eyes wild. Probably. Sometimes, he said. Not now. She pressed harder. He did not move. I came when you cried out. I came unarmed. Her breath hitched. She looked, really looked. Empty belt, empty hands, no guards rushing in. No command barked to disarm her. He would let her kill him before he took her choice by force. Slowly, shaking, she lowered the blade. He did not touch her. He only sat beside the cot and counted breaths with her until dawn bled gray through the shutters. One gentle choice at a time, he said when her tremors eased. She hated how much she wanted to believe him. At first light they took her to council. The chamber sat above the inner yard, all black beams and old battle standards. A long table scarred by generations of claws and steel cups. Commanders lined either side. Hard faces, winter uniforms. Wolves who'd survived too much to trust easily. At the far end stood the healer from yesterday, chin lifted, hands folded in sanctimony. Anastasia felt every eye cut to her belly. Zephyr entered last. No disguise now. Crown of dark metal at his temples, king's torque at his throat, scar unhidden. Conversation died on contact. He took position not at the head of the table but at Anastasia's shoulder. A commander with iron-gray braids spoke first. Your Majesty, this is reckless. We have no verification of her identity beyond a name and a bag of old paper. Wax-sealed lineage records, Anastasia snapped. Or forged bait, another officer said. Cult cells use pregnant decoys. She could be carrying plague, curse, spy marks. Or an enemy pup, muttered a third, too loud. Bastard bearer brings war to our gate and we feed her broth. The insult hit like spit. Anastasia bared her teeth. Zephyr moved before she could. One step forward, body a wall between her and the table. Say that again, he said softly. No one did. The gray-braided commander tried for diplomacy. Sire, with respect, border protocol is clear. Unverified petitioners are expelled to neutral pass. Expelled, Anastasia repeated, disbelief burning through fatigue. You mean delivered back to the hunters on your road? Your enemies are not our burden. Zephyr's gaze turned glacial. Any wolf who seeks sanctuary under my wall is my burden. That is the law my father swore, and his mother before him. A murmur, uneasy. The healer cleared her throat delicately. Majesty, perhaps we are losing focus. The woman is grieving and confused. She miscarried on arrival. Her agitation is understandable. Anastasia lunged a half step before Zephyr's arm barred her path. Firm, not restraining, merely warning. She lies, Anastasia hissed. The healer spread her hands. I examined blood, tissue. There is no viable fetus. Zephyr turned his head slightly toward Anastasia without taking his eyes off the healer. May I? She knew what he asked. Permission. Her heart pounded. She gave a tight nod. He placed his palm over the front of her gown, low and reverent, in full view of every commander in the room. For one suspended second, nothing. Then the pup kicked, hard enough to jump beneath his hand. A collective intake of breath swept the table. Zephyr's voice rang through the chamber, edged in iron. I felt my air kick. Silence detonated. The healer went white. A captain whispered, "Air?" Another, disbelieving, "Scent bond?" Zephyr lifted his hand and let the room breathe in the proof. His scent braided now unmistakably with hers, bond bright and undeniable. From this moment, Anastasia Silvermane stands under crown protection as my fated mate and Luna candidate. Any hand raised against her answers to me. The gray-braided commander bowed first, reluctant but bound by law. Others followed slower, heads dipping one by one. Only the healer remained upright. Zephyr looked at her. "You will submit to scent oath testimony." Her composure cracked. "Majesty, that right is for treason trials." "Exactly." An old priest at the side wall stiffened. "Scent oath cannot be refused without confession." "Then let her refuse," Zephyr said. The healer's eyes flicked toward the door, toward escape, toward invisible allies who were not here to save her. Sweat beaded at her temple. "I require counsel," she stammered. "Denied," Zephyr said. Anastasia watched the woman's mask fracture and understood at last how deep this rot ran. Queen Mother coin, false death, burial linens ready before her body was cold. They had expected her silent, sedated, disappeared. Instead, she stood in council with a king at her side and her child kicking defiance into his palm. Zephyr glanced back at her then. Only a glance, quick and searching, asking if she remained steady. For the first time, Anastasia answered with the smallest nod that meant yes. Not trust, not yet. But not refusal either. Not refusal either. Zephyr straightened and turned back to the council table. "Seal the chamber. No one leaves until oath is taken." Bolts slammed into place on both doors. 2 wardens dragged the iron brazier from the wall niche to the center of the room and fed it crushed moon sage and black salt. Bitter smoke rose in a thin blue coil. The old priest stepped forward, face carved from winter oak. "Healer Brindle, state your true name and lineage before scentfire." The healer licked suddenly dry lips. "Mara Brindle, daughter of..." Louder. "Mara Brindle, daughter of Hest and Rowan Brindle of Frostmere." The priest nodded once. "You stand before Alpha Witness. Lie, and your own scent convicts you." Mara's hands trembled as she held them over the smoke. Wolves all around the room leaned in, nostrils flaring, reading every shift of fierce sweat and breath. "Did you falsely diagnose miscarriage?" the priest asked. Mara's jaw worked. "No." Every commander in the room snarled at once. Lie scent hit sharp and sour, unmistakable. Zephyr's voice dropped to a lethal calm. "Ask again." The priest did. This time Mara squeezed her eyes shut. "Yes." Anastasia felt the room tilt, rage hot and clean. "By whose order?" Zephyr asked. Mara shook her head hard. "I can't." Zephyr moved one step closer. "You already have." Tears leaked from the healer's lashes, furious and humiliated. Lady Regent Sigrun paid through her chamberlain, Queen Mother coin, 3 sun marks, stamped and sealed. She said the widow had to be declared empty before noon. A hiss rippled through the commanders. One slammed a fist into the table. Another whispered, horrified, "Sigrun?" Anastasia tasted iron where she'd bitten her cheek. Queen Mother. Real now, not whispers in a corridor. Zephyr did not flinch, but something shuddered behind his eyes. "Why before noon?" Mara's breath hitched. Because a morning transfer order was already drafted. For the lost royal pup. The priest stiffened. "Transfer to where?" Mara whispered it. "St. Corin Sanctuary." Anastasia went cold to the marrow. "That's not a sanctuary." Her voice cut the room like wire. "It's a cult-holding house in pilgrim robes. They process blood there before rites." Several heads snapped toward her. She pulled the satchel against her ribs and met their stares. "I grew up 2 valleys from their roots. I know the smoke they burn. I smelled it in my den when they killed my mate. Zephyr's nostrils flared, catching memory and truth together. Who were you delivering her to at St. Corin, Mara? Mara shook harder, knees nearly buckling. I never met him. Messages only, signed with a broken eclipse. Magnus's mark. The name came from 3 mouths at once, low and ugly. Ironhold. The priest's next question cracked like a whip. State the conspiracy in full. Mara sobbed once, then words poured out too fast to stop. Infirmary bribes, drugged broth prepared, burial linens staged before Anastasia woke. False decree authorizing transfer of unstable widow and remains to religious custody. All timed to the eclipse in 5 nights, when old ward lines thinned and blood rights struck hardest. And what was the right for? Zephyr asked, voice now all steel. Mara stared at the smoke. To break the royal mountain wards with prophecy blood, to prove your line weak, to let Magnus enter the sanctum and claim title as protector of ordinary blood. Silence. Then, very quietly, Zephyr said, he means to cut out an unborn child in the name of purity. No one answered. No one needed to. Mara sagged. He said if the Pax believed the pup already dead, no one would look too closely at a mourning cart. Anastasia's wolf surged, teeth bared. She saw it all at once, grief manufactured as camouflage, her body declared hysterical, her child erased by paperwork and linen. Not chaos. Design. Magnus Ironhold was dangerous because he made murder look like procedure. Zephyr gave orders in a blur. Mara brindled to iron custody, triple guard, no private visits, audit every infirmary ledger for the last moon, seal St. Corin roads, send outriders to every pass and drag in any cart flying morning white. The bolts were drawn. The room exploded into motion. As captains ran, a runner collided through the outer door, breathless. Majesty, Queen Mother demands immediate audience. She says you've overstepped regency privilege. Zephyr didn't even look at him. Tell her privilege ends where treason begins. The garrison changed shape by afternoon. Extra sentries on walls, hounds loosed in the lower courtyards, messengers sprinting until their boots smoked. Anastasia felt hunted even in protected rooms, because now every corridor held urgency, and urgency smelled like fear. Zephyr had moved her from the infirmary annex to a former officer's suite above the armory. 1 door, 1 balcony, 2 female guards she chose herself from a lineup. He let her inspect the lock, the shutters, the adjoining storage closet, then waited while she checked under the bed like a suspicious cat. Anything else? He asked. She eyed him. Yes, my knife. He produced it from inside his coat and offered it hilt first. Confiscated property returned. She took it, surprised. You trust me with steel in your house? I trust you with your own skin. The air between them tightened, warm and volatile. A horn blew from the east wall. Both of them turned instinctively. Report? Zephyr called as a guard appeared at the doorway. 2 riders caught testing the postern gate, sire. Fake Abbey papers. 1 had cult ring burns. Zephyr's mouth flattened. Interrogate separately. The guard saluted and vanished. Anastasia rubbed her belly where the pup had gone restless, shifting against her palm. He's probing. He's panicking, Zephyr corrected. The oath failed. Now he's improvising. She looked at him sharply. You sound like you've hunted him before. Twice. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, posture loose, but eyes hard. First time he preached in backwater pack houses. Second time he burned one of my tax caravans and blamed mountain raiders. He never stays where blood spills. He lets followers make martyrs while he gives speeches about cleansing rot. Charismatic men with clean boots, Anastasia muttered. A brief, grim smile. Exactly. A knock. Another messenger, this one pale as bone. Majesty. Regent Sigrin has invoked Burial Law 47. She sent writ demanding custody of Lady Anastasia for grief seclusion and ceremonial transfer of remains. She used the Regency seal. Anastasia laughed, disbelieving. Remains that don't exist. Law doesn't require remains if Healer's declaration stands, the messenger said weakly. Zephyr's gaze turned glacial. Healer's declaration just burned in scent fire. Regent claims the oath was coerced and invalid. Of course she did. Pressure tightened around Anastasia's ribs. Laws, seals, decrees. Different weapons than moonhooks. Same goal. Get her out from under witnesses. Zephyr took the writ, read it once, and tore it clean down the middle. Post this reply. Any attempt to remove Anastasia without her spoken consent is an act of hostile seizure. The messenger swallowed. Against the Queen Mother, sire? Against anyone. When the door closed, silence fell heavy. Anastasia stared at the torn parchment on the floor. This will split your court. It already has. And me? What am I splitting? Her voice roughened. Your kingdom? Your family? He met her eyes. You are exposing what was already broken. The words should have comforted. Instead, they scared her more, because she wanted to believe him, and wanting was dangerous. She turned away to the narrow balcony. Snow had started again, fat, slow flakes drifting over the yard where soldiers drilled with spears. Zephyr joined her after a moment, but kept one full step of distance. Her wolf noticed anyway. His heat. His scent. The pull. I hate this, she said to the snow. The politics? She shook her head. The bond. How my body reaches for you when my heart is still buried with Darien. Zephyr went very still. Thank you for saying it aloud. I sound cruel. You sound honest. She laughed once, bitter. Same thing sometimes. Below, a wagon rolled through the gate under heavy guard, tarps tied tight. Captured smugglers or seized grain. She couldn't tell. Every cart now looked like a coffin. He loved maps, she said suddenly, surprising herself. Darien. He drew little wolves in the margins when he got bored. Terrible wolves. Fat paws. Zephyr's expression softened. Tell me more. She pressed her lips together, then did. One memory, then another, like prying frozen fingers off a ledge. Darien humming while he fixed shutters. Darien burning soup and pretending it was intentional. Darien kissing her knuckles when storms made her anxious. Each detail hurt and soothed at once. Zephyr listened without interruption, without jealousy, and that quiet made something in her chest loosen. A knock broke the moment. Captain Ilya stepped in. Majesty, we traced one payment chain from Brindle's confession. Coin came through archive disbursement logs. If there's proof tying the regent directly, it'll be in vault ledgers. Anastasia's head snapped up. Ledgers can be altered. Not the iron stamp copies, Ilya said. Those are in the old records vault below chapel. Zephyr nodded. Double escort. I'm taking Anastasia there now. They were halfway down the south stair when a blood-spattered runner barreled around the landing and dropped to one knee. Majesty, custody breach in the infirmary block. 3 assigned to Brindle. 2 found drugged. 1 throat cut at post. Cell door forced. Prisoner missing. Hall wardens are searching lower levels now. Zephyr's head snapped toward Ilya. Lock inner gates. No one in morning white moves unsearched. Signal black bell alert to chapel wing and archives. Ilya was already running. Zephyr looked to Anastasia, voice clipped and calm by force. We get the ledgers and get out fast. The records vault smelled of dust, ink, and old wax. Shelves climbed from floor to ceiling, crammed with bound volumes, decree tubes, cracked leather cases. A single lantern swung overhead, throwing shadows that made rows of ledgers look like watching faces. Zephyr dismissed the escorts to the hall, then turned to Anastasia. Too much scent in here for everyone. We'll work faster alone. Door stays open. She nodded and lowered herself carefully onto a stool while he pulled archive volumes from marked shelves. Infirmary expenditures, regent chamber allocations, ceremonial transfers. He set one in front of her. "Can you read old script?" "Better than half your scribes," she said, and he huffed what might have been a laugh. They worked in companionable tension for several minutes, fingers blackening with dust. Names, dates, coin seals. Nothing. Then, wait. Anastasia flattened a page with her palm. "Here. 3 sun marks to Charitable Bereavement Support St. Corin Hospice. Same date I hit your gate." Zephyr leaned close, shoulder brushing hers. Heat flared where they touched. Neither moved away. She traced the stamp below the line. "This seal's wrong." "How?" "Regent Wolfhead should face left after winter solstice revisions. This faces right. Forged from an old press." Zephyr's jaw tightened. So someone in archive helped. Before she could answer, the pup kicked sharply. Then again. Rapid. Agitated. Anastasia sucked in breath. "He doesn't like this room." A faint hiss reached them from the hallway. Not wind. Gas. Zephyr smelled it the same instant. "Down." He yanked his coat over her mouth and nose just as pale smoke curled under the threshold. Sweet, cloying dream root cut with wolfsbane. Sedative for humans, paralysis for wolves. Shouts erupted outside. Metal rang. Someone screamed. Zephyr kicked the vault door shut and dropped the crossbar. "Stay behind the stacks." Like hell. Anastasia tore a strip from her sleeve, dampened it from the water jug, tied it over her face. "Gimme a blade." He tossed her a short utility knife from his boot. "If they breach, you run through the back scribe passage, left at the split, up 13 steps, trapdoor to chapel." "You memorized escape routes for archives?" "I memorized them for you." The admission hit her like a fist to the sternum. The outer corridor shook with impact. Once, twice. Splintering wood. A voice rang through the smoke, muffled but familiar. Mara Brindle. "By regent decree, release the widow for ceremonial transfer." Zephyr snarled low in his throat. She was in irons. "Not anymore," Anastasia said grimly. The bar jolted. Cracks spread across the doorframe. Another voice joined Mara's, male and smooth, carrying the same sermon-slick cadence Anastasia had heard over Darian's dying body. "Anastasia Silvermane," he called, "do not fear. We are here to restore order. Your king cannot keep." Her blood iced. Magnus wasn't at the door. She'd know his scent if he were, but one of his high speakers was close enough to imitate him. Zephyr braced both hands against the failing bar. "Can you move?" "Yes." "Then when I say now, you run." She gripped the utility knife, then snatched the ledger page with the forged seal and stuffed it into her bodice. Evidence first, survival second, just like Darian taught her. The door exploded inward. 3 men in mourning white tabards rushed through smoke, masks painted with crescent scars. Behind them, Mara held a parchment tube aloft, like a holy relic. "Transfer warrant." Zephyr met the first attacker head-on, claws flashing, and drove him into a shelf hard enough to shatter spines and wood. The second slashed with a hooked blade. Zephyr ducked, tore his knee out, spun. A crossbow twanged from the hall. The bolt struck Zephyr high in the shoulder, black-fletched, wolfsbane soaked. He staggered. "Now!" he roared. Anastasia ran for the back passage, then stopped dead as 2 more cultists surged up the narrow stair, cutting off escape. One held folded burial linens, the other held restraints. Mara's smile shook but held. "See? The poor grieving mother is delusional. We'll take her somewhere quiet." The wolfsbane bolt drove Zephyr to one knee. He tried to rise, snarling, but his limbs trembled, slowing by the second. A cultist seized Anastasia's wrist. She slashed his palm open and he cursed, but another grabbed her from behind, arm crushing her ribs, hand splayed over her belly. "Careful," Mara snapped. "Magnus wants the womb intact." Outside, alarm bells finally began to hammer through the garrison. Inside the vault, Anastasia was dragged backward through smoke and shattered records toward a waiting funeral stretcher draped in white. Zephyr clawed across the floor, blood bright on stone, reaching for her as paralysis crept up his arm. Their fingers missed by inches. Their fingers missed by inches. A cultist's grip clamped down on Anastasia's upper arm and hauled her onto the white-draped stretcher as if she were already a corpse. Cloth straps bit across her wrists. Another cinched over her thighs, too tight over her belly. She kicked, cursed, twisted, and Mara Brindle slapped her hard enough to ring her ears. "Hold still," Mara hissed. "If you bruise, he'll blame me." "Magnus," Anastasia spat blood. "Tell him to come carve me himself." Mara's face went pinched and mean. "He prefers his sacrifices conscious." They shoved the stretcher into the corridor. Sedative smoke hung low as swamp fog. Alarms hammered through it in frantic peals. Somewhere behind them, Zephyr roared. A raw, animal sound strangled by venom, and the sound ripped straight through Anastasia's chest. "Move!" shouted a masked cultist. "West postern before they seal." They ran. The corridor blurred in jolts of torchlight and shadowed arches. Dead records littered the floor, split ledgers, torn decrees, wax seals crushed under boots. Anastasia forced herself to see, to remember. White tabards, broken eclipse rings, Mara clutching the transfer tube, one guard limping, left knee wounded by Zephyr. Useful. At the stair landing, steel collided ahead. Captain Ilya burst through smoke with 6 royal guards at his back. "Drop her!" Ilya barked. For one desperate beat, Anastasia thought it was over. Then a woman's voice cut from the side passage, sharp with aristocratic command. "Stand down in the Regent's name." Lady Regent Sigrun's chamberlain strode into view in midnight velvet, Regency seal flashing at her throat. Soldiers behind her wore palace colors, not cult white. She thrust a parchment toward Ilya. "Emergency burial transfer, Law 47. She snapped. "Interference is contempt against the Queen Mother." Ilya didn't take the parchment. His nostrils flared at the sweet rot of sedative and blood. "That law applies to remains." The chamberlain's smile never reached her eyes. "The healer, certified loss." Mara lifted the decree tube with shaking piety. Witnessed. Confusion split the hallway like an axe in wet wood. Royal steel hesitated against royal steel. In that hesitation, the cult moved. A smoke pellet burst at Ilya's feet. 2 guards dropped coughing. The stretcher lurched sideways through a laundry hatch Anastasia hadn't seen, into a servant's runnel and down toward the lower gate. By the time Ilya cut through and reached the postern, only trampled snow and wheel ruts remained, white-draped funeral cart vanishing into storm. 4 nights bled away between hidden transit and locked stone rooms before they finally brought her where Magnus intended the ritual to be seen. St. Corin looked holy from a distance. Close, it smelled like bleach, old blood, and fear. They took Anastasia underground through a chapel crypt disguised by incense and hymnstone. Below, the sanctum opened in black volcanic glass, ringed with carved runes and chain hooks sunk into pillars. Eclipse symbols were etched everywhere, broken circles, severed crescents, prayers to ordinary blood gouged over older royal ward marks. Magnus Ironhold waited beside the central altar in a clean, dark coat, hands clasped behind his back like a host greeting guests. He was handsome in the way polished knives are handsome, gleaming, balanced, made to cut. "Widow Silvermane," he said warmly. "I regret the rough transport." Anastasia strained against the straps until they burned her skin. "You burned my home." You confuse necessity with cruelty. His pale eyes dropped to her belly with avid reverence. Your line was always going to end here. He gestured. Cultists in white masks hauled her upright and chained her wrists to a standing ring bolted in obsidian. Her feet barely touched stone. The pup rolled, agitated. Anastasia breathed through panic and tasted metal in the air, blood rites and moon salt. Magnus nodded to Mara. Did she witness enough to frighten her? Mara swallowed. She fought. She saw the transfer. Good. He turned back to Anastasia. Fear opens old blood. Old blood powers gates. You talk like a priest, Anastasia said, voice rough, but you're just a butcher with an audience. His smile sharpened. Tonight, I become protector of ordinary blood before every pack banner in the realm. By Eclipse Peak, your king will kneel where you stand. Anastasia's stomach dropped. Every pack? Magnus spread his hands toward the iron doors above the sanctum stairs. Public mourning vigil. I requested it through Regency channels. Such moving theater. Grief for a dead royal heir. He leaned in, breath cool. When I reveal your hysterical survival and the corruption of prophecy blood, they'll cheer as I purge it. So that was the play. Not hidden murder. Spectacle. Anastasia closed her eyes once and saw Zephyr on a vault floor reaching for her through wolfsbane paralysis. Saw Darian shoving the satchel into her arms. Go. She opened her eyes. You're late, she said. Magnus blinked. Pardon? The eclipse peaks tomorrow night, not tonight. She jerked her chin toward the eastern slit where moonlight showed a bite still missing. Your astronomer's either drunk or lying. A beat. He turned sharply toward one of his priests. Check. As they scrambled, she tested the chainring with tiny wrist movements. Old iron. Corroded hinge on left bracket. Not now. Later. Magnus looked back, irritated at being corrected. No matter. We begin at moonrise tomorrow. He stepped close enough for her to smell lavender oil over wolf musk. Sleep if you can, Anastasia. You'll need your voice when I make you confess. He left her chained in the dark while hymns throbbed overhead, and the child inside her kicked against terror like a drum. By dawn, Zephyr's wolves had found the crypt entrance. By noon, he had broken through the outer chapel with Captain Ilya at his side, and wolfsbane fever still silvering sweat along his spine. He found Anastasia conscious, wrists raw, eyes bright with rage instead of submission. He started toward her. She shook her head hard once. Unchain me first, she said. Then listen. Ilya cut the ring. Zephyr caught her as her knees buckled, carefully, as if he feared she'd vanish. I'm putting you in the mountain keep, he said immediately. Today. No debate. No. Anastasia grabbed his collar and pulled his face down until their foreheads touched. Listen. He called a public vigil. He wants witnesses. Let him have them. Zephyr's jaw set. You are not bait. I'm not bait if it's my plan. Her voice shook, then steadied. He only wins if this stays rumor. We need proof so loud no pack can look away. Ilya wiped blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. We have Brindle's confession. Confession can be recanted, Anastasia snapped. Ledger entries can't. We need the payment book, full chain, coin stamps, Regency sign-off, transfer writ. Zephyr frowned. The archive copy burned. No. Anastasia tapped her bodice. I took one forged page, enough to find the parent ledger if we move now. He stared at her, torn between fury and reluctant respect. I can hide you, he said, voice low. I can keep you breathing. And Magnus will preach that the unstable widow vanished because she lied. Anastasia held his gaze. I am done being moved room to room while men decide if my child exists. Silence. Then Zephyr exhaled, harsh. What do you need? Her answer came like steel sliding free. Morning white. a blade strapped along my spine, and the old sanctum gates unbarred at Eclipse Peak. They found the ledger in the regent's private disbursement chest behind a false panel in the chapel archive. Thick calfskin, iron hasped, reeking of expensive perfume and bribe coin. Anastasia opened it with trembling fingers and read names she wanted to claw out of the page. Mara Brindle, Chamberlain Voss, St. Corin Hospice, Eclipse Provisions, Funeral Linen Procurement, Carriage Hire. At the bottom, Regency sign mark, Sigrun. By twilight the next day, the mountain packs had gathered in the upper sanctum amphitheater under banners snapping in eclipse wind. Mourners wore gray. Cult sympathizers wore white thread at the wrist. Soldiers lined the aisles, tense as drawn bows. Anastasia walked in alone in mourning white, cloak hood back, ledger in both hands. A narrow blade lay flat along her spine under the fabric. Zephyr stood at the far dais with the council, face unreadable, allowing the room to believe what it wanted for one more breath. Murmurs rose. She lives. By Moon, that's the widow. Where's the child? Magnus stepped from the priest ranks in ceremonial black, smile already arranged. Beloved Pax, he called, voice carrying. Behold manufactured grief. The prophecy vessel returned to Sow Division. Quiet, Anastasia said. No shout, just command. The hall stilled anyway. She lifted the ledger high. You were told I miscarried at the border. Lie. She turned a page. You were told I was transferred for protection. Lie. Another page. You were told Regency coin fed widows while winter stores ran thin. Lie. She began reading names. Each one struck like a hammer. Chamberlain Voss, Healer Mara Brindle, St. Corin Quartermaster Halvek. Mourning Cartmaster Jer. 3 captains bought with bereavement stipends, coin amounts, dates, seal stamps. Gasps rippled. A commander swore aloud. Someone in the upper tier shouted, "That's my son's patrol stipend, stolen." Magnus's smile thinned. He raised both arms toward the ritual ring carved into the sanctum floor. Defamation from corrupted blood. By old right, let Moon judge truth. Cultists in the crowd slammed iron staves into hidden sockets. Runes flared sickly blue. The ritual circle ignited, lines racing toward Anastasia's feet like living lightning. Zephyr moved, but wardfire leapt up between dais and floor, a barrier of crackling light. Ilya shouted orders as soldiers shoved through panicking spectators. Too slow. Anastasia did not run. She drew the blade from her spine, sliced her own palm to the bone, and slammed bleeding fingers onto the nearest rune. Pain detonated white-hot. The circle bucked. Silvermane blood spread over carved grooves, and the ward current snarled backward like a river forced uphill. One by one, blue lines flashed silver instead. The barrier around Zephyr stuttered. Gates! Anastasia screamed at the wardens by the rear arch. Open the sanctum gates. Let everyone see. They hesitated one heartbeat, then through the bars. Great iron doors boomed wide. More witnesses flooded in from the outer court. Pack elders, merchants, militia, kitchen hands, everyone drawn by alarm bells and moonfire. No hidden right now. No private murder. Magnus's face finally cracked. Killer! He snarled. Cult guards surged. Zephyr hit them first when the ward wall failed, tearing through white-tabard lines with claws half-shifted, blood on his teeth. Ilya and Royal Wolves crashed in behind him. Steel rang against hook blades, screams bounced off stone. Anastasia backed toward the altar, guarding her belly with one arm, blade in the other. A masked priest lunged. She sidestepped and drove her knife into his thigh, yanked free, pivoted. Another swung high. She ducked and slashed his wrist open. Then Magnus was there. He seized her throat in one hand and slammed her onto the obsidian altar hard enough to blacken her vision. In his other hand, a sacrificial hook arced silver over her abdomen. Your line and screaming, he hissed, spittle flecking her cheek, and your king kneels to me. Anastasia's lungs burned. She couldn't get leverage, couldn't breathe, couldn't. Head. She drove her skull into his nose with every ounce of force she had. Cartilage crunched. Magnus reeled, cursing. Anastasia ripped the spine blade up and through his forearm as he brought the hook down, pinning his arm to the altar edge. He howled, fingers spasming open, hook clattering away inches from her belly. Across the sanctum, Zephyr roared her name and tore a cult guard clear off his feet. Magnus jerked against the blade, half freeing himself, blood slicking obsidian. Prophecy dies with that unborn mongrel. Anastasia saw the eclipse chain hanging from the altar pillar, thick ceremonial links used to bind offerings. She lunged, grabbed, and whipped it around his neck from behind. "No!" she growled in his ear, hauling tight as he clawed at the links. Prophecy survives because mothers bite back. She planted both feet in his lower back and kicked. Magnus toppled over the altar lip, tangled in chain, and crashed into the ritual fire pit at its base, now overfed with reversed ward current. Moonfire erupted silver-white. His scream cut once, then broke into choking silence as flames consumed cloth, hair, flesh. The broken eclipse medallion at his throat melted into glowing slag. The sanctum froze. No one moved for 3 heartbeats except fire. Then the chain went slack. Anastasia stood shaking above the pit, blood running from her palm, chest heaving, moonlight and firelight crossing her face like war paint. Around her, Pax stared. Not at a vessel, not a rumor, but a woman who had ended the man who hunted her. Zephyr reached her through the stunned crowd and caught her before her knees gave out. She gripped his tunic with bloody fingers and held on while the last of Magnus' Ironhold burned. Night fell clean after blood. At the moonpool ruins beyond the sanctum, broken columns ringed black water that reflected the eclipsed moon now sliding free. Witnesses gathered in a respectful circle: elders, captains, widows, pack priests, Captain Ilya with his bandaged jaw. No court pomp, no hidden chambers, just stone, water, breath, and truth. Anastasia stood wrapped in a dark cloak, hair damp where she'd washed Magnus's blood away. A fresh bandage crossed her palm. Zephyr faced her with his crown set aside on a pillar. He did not touch her yet. "Before witnesses," he said, voice carrying across the pool, "I ask what should have been asked the first moment fate struck us." His eyes held hers, steady, no command in them. "Will you choose me?" he said, "not as rescue, not as obligation, but as equal?" The old grief rose in her throat. Darian's smile, Darian's last breath, the life that had ended in fire. It did not vanish. It stood beside her, honored, while something new reached forward with open hands. Anastasia stepped closer until their boots nearly touched. "Yes," she said, clear enough for every witness. "I choose you, as equal." A tremor went through Zephyr like a bowstring released. He lifted his hand slowly, waiting. She tipped her head, baring the junction of neck and shoulder. "Mine?" he whispered, breath warm on her skin. "Yours," she whispered back, and her wolf answered with a pulse of heat. His fangs sank in. Pain flared sharp and bright, a lightning strike at the nerve-dense curve above her collarbone. Anastasia gasped, fingers flying to his shoulders. For one wild second it was only bite, pressure, blood. Then the bond opened. Heat flooded outward from the mark, molten and sweet, pain melting into a deep, aching pleasure that rolled down her spine and through her belly where the pup kicked hard in startled approval. Emotion poured with it, Zephyr's fierce protectiveness, his guilt, his restraint, his wonder, her rage, her grief, her stubborn will to survive, not erased, shared. She felt Darian's memory settle, not pushed away, but set in a place of honor, and Zephyr did not flinch from it. He held it with her, Tears stung unexpectedly. She laughed on a broken breath and gripped the back of his neck as he sealed the mark with his tongue, reverent, shaking. "Mine," he said against her skin, voice wrecked. She pulled back just enough to see his throat, the pulse beating hard beneath scarred skin. He bared it willingly, chin lifting in absolute trust. "Your turn," he murmured. Anastasia slid her hand to the nape of his neck and drew him down. "Mate," she whispered, then bit over his pulse. He jerked with a guttural sound, half pain, half hunger, fingers digging into her hips as her fangs pierced. His blood hit her tongue, salt, smoke, cedar. Power surged again, this time in both directions at once, a braided current locking into place. The world sharpened. She could feel his heartbeat syncing with hers, the rhythm of his breath, the exact moment his wolf settled and pressed against hers in quiet recognition. "Yours," the bond sang. "Mine," she answered without words. When she released him, a bead of blood traced down his throat. She licked it away before she could overthink the instinct, and his eyes flashed molten gold. Witnesses around the pool thumped fists to chests in old approval. The priest spoke the formal line, voice thick with emotion. "Two marked, mutually sworn, moon-witnessed." Zephyr drew her into him, forehead to forehead, both of them breathing hard. "No more lies between us," he whispered. Anastasia touched the new mark at his throat, then the one burning at her shoulder. "Then stand beside me when I lead." His smile was fierce and tender all at once. "Always, my mate." They stayed like that a long while, arms wrapped, wolves quiet, bond finally settled into something steady as mountain stone. The trial hall was full to the rafters 3 days later. Mara Brindle stood in chains at the center circle, eyes hollow. Chamberlain Voss beside her sweated through embroidered wool. At the high bench, Queen Mother Sigrun faced the Pax in widow black, spine rigid, Regency torque already removed. Anastasia sat at Zephyr's right on the raised dais, Luna mark visible above her collar. When murmurs rose, she stood. "Read the confession," she told the clerk. The clerk's voice echoed over stone. Bribes accepted, false diagnosis issued, forged burial transfer authorized, conspiracy with St. Corin and Magnus Ironhold. Gasps, curses, one elder openly weeping in rage. Zephyr passed sentence on Mara and Voss. Life labor in the northern hospice mines under oath brand, proceeds seized for families harmed by cult violence. Then came Sigrun. The Queen Mother looked at her son, then at Anastasia, and for the first time seemed her age. "I paid to prevent prophecy consolidation," she said, each word forced. I believed one death would spare civil war." "One death?" Anastasia's voice cracked like ice. "You budgeted my child as a line item." Sigrun flinched. By law, a former regent could not be executed without pack war. Anastasia knew it. So did everyone listening. She stepped forward anyway. "I petition not for blood, but for stripping." The hall stilled. Strip Sigrun of regency, seal her estates, dissolve her private guard. Her treasury funds war widows, orphan dens, and bloodline sanctuaries in every border pass. She serves under oath in those sanctuaries until the debt is met. A widow in the crowd shouted, "Yes!" Others pounded benches. Zephyr looked at Anastasia, pride bright in his eyes, then to the hall. "So ordered." Sigrun bowed her head, ruined by law instead of steel. Coronation came under a clear moon. In the mountain amphitheater, Zephyr knelt first and swore before Pax and priests to rule with shared crown. Then he rose and placed the Luna circlet, silver threaded with wolf tooth and moonstone, on Anastasia's head. "By blood, bond, and witness," he declared, "Anastasia Silvermane Wildfire is Luna Queen. Authority vested over law of sanctuary, war widow protections, and bloodline archives. Cheers thundered against the cliffs. After the oaths, Anastasia walked not to the feast but to the new archive vault, carved into bedrock beneath the hall. Darian's satchel lay in her arms. She set it on the central table, unfolded the oilcloth, and placed each record in fireproof chests marked with royal and Silvermane seals. Captain Ilya stood guard at the door, smiling despite himself. "No child erased by paperwork again," he said quietly. Anastasia sealed the last chest. No mother either. Months later, moonlight silvered the royal bedchamber while Winter slept outside. Zephyr lay behind Anastasia, one arm curved around her, broad hand splayed over the heavy round of her belly where their son pressed impatient heels against skin. He had done this every night, wordless, reverent, still amazed each time the baby answered. "Kick." Zephyr laughed softly into her hair. "There, again. Fierce already." Anastasia covered his hand with hers. The mark on her shoulder warmed under his breath. His throat mark pulsed against her nape. "Maybe he just likes proving healers wrong," she murmured. A contraction rolled. Real, deep, undeniable. She inhaled sharply. Zephyr was upright in an instant. "Was that—" "Yes." She grinned through the tightening. "Get the midwife, Your Majesty." Hours later, as dawn painted the mountains pale gold, a wet, furious cry filled the chamber. Zephyr held their son with shaking hands, awe-struck and blood-splattered, then laid him on Anastasia's chest. The baby rooted blindly, fists clenched, a shock of dark hair already stubborn as both parents. Anastasia kissed his damp forehead and whispered, "Welcome, little moon." Zephyr pressed his brow to hers, tears unapologetic in his eyes. "Mine," he whispered to both of them. "Yours," she whispered back. Then, with a tired, fierce smile, "Mate." Outside, bells rang not for morning, but for life. Inside, their wolves settled together in synchronized breath, while morning sun climbed the stone and found them whole.